2023 has been one hell of a year for motoring, and we here at Goodwood Road and Racing have sampled some of the very best machinery that is currently on sale.
Yes, that's why we've brought together today 9 cars that we think represent the different sections of the industry best, and brought them together to test them not against each other, but to showcase exactly what is going on right now.
Now, we've already introduced you to the 9 cars we've got on show, but I would just like to remind you to like and share this video, subscribe to our channel for everything that we've got going on here at Goodwood Road and Racing. And I'd just also like to say, welcome to the Goodwood Road and Racing Car of the Year.
If you want a car to showcase the past, the present and the future of motoring, then I give you this, the McLaren Artura, a supercar powered by a V6 engine that's a plug-in hybrid and can run in EV mode on complete silence. Now, when I drove this car a year or so ago, I said I wasn't quite sure what its purpose was, and I sort of stand by that. It's not a competitor for the 296 GTB. McLaren says it's not a replacement for the 570S. What it is a little bit of a stopgap, a point in between full petrol supercars and the EV future. What it also is absolutely bloody brilliant. Downsizing from a V8 to a V6 in a supercar, well, sounds a little bit like heresy, doesn't it? But I tell you what, it absolutely works. The V6 in this car it's sweet, it revs wonderfully, it has power all through the range, and more importantly, it's small, it's light and it's compact, which means that they can fit the batteries and motor for its electric power in there. And I know what you're thinking. A few of you right now are going, electric power, I don't like that, it's not right. Well, you're wrong. And now we must introduce the concept of torque fill. In as simple terms as possible, McLaren turbocharges its engines. They're very clever. The turbochargers are within the V. It's all very nerdy. But with all turbochargers, there is lag. You see, a turbocharger works basically by spinning a big fan that compresses air down to make it more bangy when it goes in the engine. But it spins the fan through sending exhaust gases past it, and you need to have power to send exhaust gases out, so you need to put your foot down, etc., etc. And that means lag before it can spin up properly. If you have an electric motor, there's none of those problems. Electric motors spin up immediately. So once that's there, you can get all the torque you need straight away. Oh, and also, it means the Artura doesn't need a reverse gear. Clever, that. And that means that you can get pretty much everything the Artura can offer the moment that you move your right foot. All 670 horsepower, all 720 Newton meters, right there at almost any point, in a way that no other McLaren has offered before. It really is absolutely brilliant. Add to that a pin-sharp steering rack and the first electronic differential that a McLaren has ever had, and this just becomes a wonderful machine. It's really, really joyous to drive. The front end is pin sharp, and that diff is excellent. It's open on the way into a corner for just a little bit of drift, and then it slams shut the moment that you put your foot down to really give you that exit straight line. And it works so well. On a day like today, when it's being very British about things, we're spinning wheels all over the place. It was spinning out of the chicane in second, third and fourth. But when it does that in a straight line, it doesn't ever feel like it's going to try and spit you off to the side like, say, a 911 Turbo can do. Instead, it just does it in a straight line. That makes you giggle. I really, really cannot express how brilliant this car is. And that makes me think, how can there be anything else in the world that provides such a good feeling as this car?
I can think of something. What we have here is the Maserati MC20 Cielo. It's the convertible version of the MC20. It's small, it's lightweight, and my God, is it good to drive. Like the McLaren, it's a V6 supercar, but unlike the McLaren, there's no hybrid in here. This is a naturally aspirated Nettuno V6 engine, the one found in the coupe version of the MC20. It's producing 630 horsepower, 730 Newton meters of torque, and the result is honestly slightly terrifying. You get a huge amount of response from that throttle. It's pin sharp as you so much as suggest you're going to put some pressure onto the pedal. The acceleration from the twin turbocharged V6 is hugely impressive for a car that is, you know, it's nowhere near the thousands of horsepower that we see in cars these days, especially from the EV sector. But even so, it's more than you could ever really need, especially on a day like today. I'm doing my absolute best just to keep hold of the thing as it absolutely fires away from the apex. Oh man. Then you've got the carbon brakes, which once you get them heated up, they just work so wonderfully. There's an excellent feel to the pedal. As you start to apply pressure, you pile on those brakes and you definitely stop, there's no doubt about it. Now the MC20 as a standard coupe is a properly engineered piece of kit. It's glued to the road no matter how you treat it, and in my opinion, lopping the top off any car is an improvement in some form or another. And while yes, the Cielo may have lost some of that rigidity that you get in the coupe, you do of course get the option of slinging the roof down and hearing that V6 whir and whine in your ear, and honestly I can't think of anything better, perhaps on a slightly sunnier day, but good grief, this car sounds good. You still get plenty of control through the chassis, the suspension is still spot on. It might be softer, but it's by no means a lesser car in terms of handling. It's still very impressive when you're pitching it in and feeling it grit. I so hope that cars like this hang around because this is too much fun. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, now you're talking.
Porsche 911s come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. There's ones for going off-road, there's ones for the track, there's ones for crushing continents, and there's ones for dispatching B-roads. And then, well, then there's this one. This one that takes every other 911 and crushes them up into a little ball so we can kick them into the bin. It really is hard to convey just how good this car is. Every preconception you have about the new 911 GT3 RS, every thought you have about how good it could be, everything you've ever been thinking, it's probably wrong, because this car is just better. It's better than all of those things that you're thinking. It is ever so slightly faster to 60 miles an hour than the GT3. It's got ever so slightly more power. It's actually slightly slower overall than the GT3. But all of those numbers, they are dwarfed in comparison to the one that really matters. This car produces 860 kilograms of downforce. 860. That is twice as much as the current GT3. It's nearly 7 times as much as the 991 GT3. It's got adjustable dampers independently for compression and rebound, both front and rear. The diff can be adjusted for both corner in and power out. And the TC is adjustable. The severity of the shifts can be changed. The traction control can be adjusted. It's even got DRS. DRS like a Formula One car. You can halve the downforce with the push of a button. This steering wheel has more buttons on it than an entire Polestar has in its cabin. And yet, somehow, the 911 GT3 RS, all 180,000 pounds of it feels completely, totally unintimidating. The GT3 and the GT3 Touring have front ends that turn in almost like they're directly linked to your brain. And this is better. This does it better. The turn-in is incredible. The way you can adjust the diff to give you more or less slip. It's almost like witchcraft. And then there's those cut twos, which are so magnificently progressive. Every time you go into a corner, you can go harder. You just think, oh, you know what? I could have turned in later there. I could have pushed it a little bit harder. I could have braked later. Brakes are brilliant, by the way. I could get on the power sooner. And then there's that 9,000 RPM flat 6 behind us, which sounds magnificent. Perhaps not quite as good as the one in the GT4 RS, but still fantastic. And it responds wonderfully. It's got new hot cams, which mean that it has sacrificed a little bit of the torque at the top end, but gives you better torque response in the middle, which means that you don't have to be constantly revving it out to 8,898 RPM before you shift. It is in fact ever so slightly heavier than the GT3, and that's because of all the hydraulics that have gone into it for the adjustable aero. And that also means they've had to move the radiator at the front up, so there is actually no luggage space, but who cares? You don't notice the weight. Honestly, I can't think of how there could possibly be another 911 that I need more than the 911 GT3 RS.
This has to be one of the greatest ideas in motoring history. Take arguably the most famous sports car in the world, the Porsche 911, and turn it into this, the Porsche 911 Dakar. Almost 40 years since the 953 won the Dakar Rally, Porsche has paid homage by putting this together, and quite frankly, this might be the coolest car in the world. It's based on the 911 Carrera 4 GTS, but once you look past the chassis, the engine, the transmission, it becomes very clear that Dakar is a very different beast. It's been raised by 50 millimeters. There's an active lift system which can lift it by a further 30, and the underside has been reinforced for greater protection when you decide to do things like this and tackle a rally stage. You only have to look over your shoulder to realise that the Dakar is more than just your standard road car. While Porsche hasn't intended it to take part in professional rallying, it's certainly been built like it. Porsche's gone full roleplay and removed both of the rear seats and replaced it with a pretty serious looking roll cage, and that's obviously there in the name of safety, but it's also helping to save a fantastic amount of weight. The bonnet is made from carbon fibre reinforced plastic, and all in, the Dakar weighs just 1,605 kilos. That's 10 kilos less than the standard GTS. You can just tell that so much hard work has gone into making this car tick. It's still got that same twin turbo 3 litre flat 6, which is just sublime as always. It's pumping out 480 horsepower, which brings up a 0 to 62 time in just 3.4 seconds. The car we've got here is fitted with some pretty knobbly looking off-road tyres, and the grip that they produce is awe-inspiring. Then there's the handling. It's obviously got four-wheel drive, and somehow Porsche has managed to keep the car well planted even when you're being chucked around on fairly harsh terrain. It feels every bit like the 911 it was designed from. It's just so impressive. You can play with the grip, you can play with the back end. It doesn't chuck itself away when you ask it to. Why didn't they do this sooner? But perhaps the best thing about this car, aside from all the ridiculousness of driving a 911 off-road, is that it's still absolutely sublime on-road. This is still a 911. It's still engineered to almost perfection. You can chuck it into corners. The grip is still exactly as you want it. It will stick just like any other of its 911 siblings. In fact, with the slightly longer suspension travel, stick it in normal mode, and this might actually be the most comfortable 911 to cruise in that there's ever been. You know, you're still 50 millimeters higher than you would be in the GTS, but compared to an SUV or standard hatchback, you're still pretty low to the ground in the grand scheme of things, and it still feels like a sports car. The power picks up just as you want it to. The throttle response is still spectacular. And then there's that noise, which is pure 911. Oh, hello. Even when you come across a tree in the road, you can just head off on the verge there and pass it by.
Yes, here we are. This is it. You can take your supercars, your off-road machines, you can keep your EVs on the road. This does everything that all of them do, and it does it better. This, the M3 Touring, is probably, no, definitely the best car that's come out this year as far as I am concerned. It is just ridiculously, stupendously brilliant. Somehow, it turns out that the M3 is even better when it becomes an estate. I don't know what they've done. And yes, okay, it is still a little bit, but, you know, we knew that already. What we also know is that it has the same 3-litre twin turbocharged straight 6 under the bonnet as the less capacious cars. So 510 horsepower, 550 Newton meters of torque. And that means, because there is a bit more metal here, it is slightly slower to 60 miles an hour, 0.2 seconds to be precise. And you know, that is time. In 0.2 seconds, you can blink twice. But even if it was enough of an amount slower to 62 miles an hour that you actually had time to do something with your life, it still absolutely would not matter. Because the real trick up the M3 Touring sleeve is not its engine or how fast it goes in a straight line. It's the chassis. Because this thing's extraordinary. Somehow it feels like the M3 was always meant to be an estate car, and it's just waiting to have this bigger body stuck on the top. Maybe it's the fact that there's more weight over the rear axle now than there was before, but something means this feels even better than it ever has. There's also, it's got the xDrive 4-wheel drive system, which I know many people out there straight away will get annoyed about the fact there's a BMW with 4-wheel drive and it's not rear-wheel drive, but honestly, you're wrong. If you put it in 4-wheel drive sport, it spends most of its time as a rear-wheel drive car anyway and slings all that power back, and the front end just gets involved to give you extra traction when you need it. And what's wrong with extra traction? And it feels delightfully rear biased. And if that's not enough, you can switch it off. You can make it rear-wheel drive all the time with the brilliant M switches. And then once you've got your settings set up, once you've found your desired setup, it is just incredible how this thing handles. The balance, especially in the corners. The front end has so much safe feeling grip, and then you can just floor it when you get out the other side and in the mid corner, just to either bring it perfectly into line, or if you're being a bit of a nut job, to send the back end flying out to have some fun. It just has to be one of the most joyously, wonderfully, stupidly enjoyable cars that's come out this year. And we waited and waited and waited and waited so long for them to build it. It could have been absolutely awful, but it's just brilliant.
Now, if you're talking about the very best road cars currently on sale, then you simply have to factor in the Honda Civic Type R. This new version it went on sale during 2023. I first drove it back in January on a incredibly rainy day at Thruxton, and even in those conditions, I was just taken aback by how well sorted out this car is. You can see what a manufacturer can do when they just work and work and work on a car for 6 generations. This is the 6th generation of the Civic Type R, and everything, the chassis, the suspension, the engine, the gear shift, it's all just perfectly honed into what is a remarkable piece of kit. It's so smooth, so well balanced around the corner. The grip is to die for. It's utterly spectacular in every sense, and just to drive it on roads like this where we're catching the apex just about right, it's just so enjoyable. I think honestly that this is the very best version of the Civic Type R that we've ever seen. It's been honed to an absolute T. There is not a single element of this car that you could pick and say, oh, it was better on a previous generation. It's just the best in every single way. Even when it comes to the design, from an aesthetic point of view, all of the silly addendums, they've all gone. It's been replaced by a mature, competent looking car, and that translates perfectly onto what it does on the road. Forget the best Civic Type R ever. This has got to be one of the very best cars ever made. It's just that good. It's so well made in every single aspect. The gear shift is smooth and slick. The steering is so precise, so ready to respond to your input. The chassis is just brilliantly engineered. It rides the road. It's firm, but it's so on point with keeping the car balanced and under control through corners and in a straight line. There is really very little else, especially at this kind of price point, that is going to offer you anything like the kind of driving experience that you're getting here. To be honest, I don't want to spend all day driving this car on the road, because as good as it is, this is a car that is fundamentally designed to be enjoyed on a racetrack. Of course, the rain has started, so we'll do what we can, I suppose. This is by far and away the best version of the Civic Type R we have ever seen. It's got a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. It's producing 329 horsepower, 420 newton meters of torque. It's again more power than we've ever seen from a Civic Type R, and honestly, it makes such a difference to this machine, especially when we're out here on the track. Then you've got the chassis, the suspension, everything's been honed, everything's working to the absolute peak of performance in a road car. And what you get is this wonderful balance, this wonderful feeling of grip, even on a day like this, when we're just able to have confidence in the handling as we send it into a corner. The balance on the braking is just sublime. Then there's the gear shift, this wonderful snickety short throw gear shift, the manual box that we're missing so much in cars these days. It's so refreshing to be able to pluck a gear with such ease. Just adds an extra layer to this beautiful, wonderful car. You can see why it's breaking records at places like Suzuka. There's something extra special about a car like this when you know it's been designed with the track in mind. There's no doubt that when they put this Civic together, they wanted it to be quick round a track. They wanted it to be usable in this kind of environment. You've got the rev matching on the gears if you want it, which for a rookie driver really makes the process of learning to drive on a track that much simpler. You've obviously got the R+ mode, which can only mean one thing, taking this thing out and racing it hard. I could gush about this car all day, but I think that's enough talking from me. Let's let the car do the talking.
It's all very nice, but it's a little bit noisy, isn't it? Why don't we try something a bit different? That's a bit nicer, isn't it? Bentley's Flying Spur. It's one of those cars that just comes to mind when you think about luxury, like the Rolls-Royce Phantom or Mercedes S-Class. The kind of car that you only ever see being exited by warlords or billionaires. But there's something about the Flying Spur that's just a little bit less, I don't know, ostentatious than the other two. It's got a certain style that means it's perhaps a little less attempting to show off. It's also got something else a little bit different, a W12 engine. Now, what is a W12 engine? Well, you can look at it one of two ways. It's either two V6 engines sort of mounted opposite each other onto the same crankshaft, or one really big V6 and a little V6 inside it. Why? Well, the concept means that it should give you 12 cylinders in a much shorter period of time. Should be about half the size. And that means it saves you size inside the front of a car. What that means is it's complicated. And is it worth the compromises? Does it sound better than a V8? No. Is it faster than a V8? In this case, oh yes, 650 horsepower, 900 Newton meters of torque. That makes the Bentley Bentayga Speed with its 770 Newton meters look absolutely piffling. It means it'll hit 62 miles an hour. This car, this 2.5 ton car that's longer than a Range Rover, will hit 62 miles an hour in 3.7 seconds. That is only less than a second slower than the McLaren Artura. That's insane. But it being a Bentley, it does it in its own kind of way. It doesn't ram you in the back, it just picks up speed like a boat until we are suddenly there. And then you waft your way along. Magnificent. But since we're in a Bentley, all of that's a little bit sort of nouveau, isn't it? A bit, all we really want is to study the fact that it's delicious in here, isn't it? There's no wood in this one, but there's fantastic rich veneers and leather, and the quality of everything in a Bentley interior these days is just so far above almost anything else around. It's nearly funny. And no part of us will ever get bored of just being able to hide away that horrible screen and just see these lovely dials whenever we want to. But it's a little bit odd right now, isn't it? I'm in a Bentley. I shouldn't really be here, should I? There. That's better, isn't it? Who buys a Bentley Flying Spur to drive it? Hold on a sec. I'll just adjust that. That's better, isn't it? You see, the thing is, this isn't just any Flying Spur with a W12. That's not why we have it here. This is one that there's only ever going to be 120 of, because this is the last one. The Bentley Flying Spur Speed Edition 12 is celebrating the end of an engine that has been with us for 20 years. 20 years ago, Volkswagen mated two of its VR6 engines together and created what has been in Bentleys ever since, this magnificent W12. And now, this car with the firing order written on the dashboard is saying a long, loving and glorious goodbye. But we can't be too sad about this end. Speaking of changes to the automotive landscape, well, it was a little bit different, isn't it? Bye-bye wood veneers, goodbye nice metal inserts, goodbye to my chauffeur. Because this is a family hatchback, an EV that will hit 60 miles an hour just as fast as that Bentley, but with just a little bit more drama when it does it. God, it really is quite brutal. By now, we should surely be used to the kind of electric torque you get in these cars, but it just doesn't end. No matter how many times I drive the MG4 XPower, every single time I go from 30 to 60, I have to brace my body beforehand just to make sure that my liver doesn't somehow end up in the boot. Imagine this kind of powertrain in that Bentley. No noise from pistons, none of that horrible clattering from an engine, and just the ability to dispatch oiks at the merest flick of your toe. This could well be the future. Or not. A 5-door car that can hit 62 miles an hour in the kind of speed that makes the old Metro 6R4 look a little bit weedy. So, is this the first EV hot hatch? Well, it's got its flaws. It's heavy. It's not as heavy as the Bentley, but it's 1,800 kilograms. So you're not going to be chucking it into any corners. This is not going to be a wheel-cocking little puppy of a car. But it does actually handle that weight well. What you need with this car is a longer, more flowing kind of road, and then you can have quite a lot of fun. But actually, the reason that this car is here is not to do with what it is. It's because this showcases where MG is going in the future. Another confident British brand that knows what it wants. And this, with its flaws, still manages to be fun. And once you get used to that 2-stage powertrain, you can do the kind of things that perhaps an MG should be able to do. And that makes us really hopeful for the cars that follow. And that's why it deserves to be here with all the other cars for our Cars of the Year.
And while we're talking about cars of the future, let's just pay very close attention to this. It's the Hyundai Ioniq 6, and quite honestly, aside from all of the drama, the fun, the exotic sports cars that we've had on display during this video, this might well be my favorite. And there's a very simple reason for that. What Hyundai has done is just try something different, something that we haven't really seen before, especially not from an EV. First of all, just look at it. It's streamlined to such an extent that it's boasting a 0.21 drag coefficient. It's the most efficient EV you can buy in terms of aerodynamics, and that just makes so much sense, doesn't it? It's the biggest complaint we always have about these cars is, oh, the range isn't quite enough. But what Hyundai's doing is trying at least to move the goalposts and say, right, okay, well, if the range isn't enough, what can we do to extend that? And so they've made it more efficient through the air. That's putting less strain on the battery. You're getting more range for your money. And that's exactly the kind of problem solving that is just so refreshing with this car. The Ioniq 6 is really just turning the EV world upside down at the moment. And it's obviously packing all the standard EV tropes that we're used to. The transmission tunnel is gone, so we've got a load of storage space in the front here. That's carried on in the rear where we've got, frankly, an obnoxious amount of legroom. It's really a spacious thing. Everything's been kind of shunted forwards into the bonnet where the engine would normally be. So we've got this huge interior with plenty of space, plenty of comfort. It's a really useful and practical car. You know, you could see yourself driving around with your family in this thing. But I think aside from all of that is the brilliant surprise that comes with actually driving this car. It feels so nice on the road. It's a little tough, but what you get instead is a wonderfully put together piece of engineering. The chassis feels controlled and balanced. The steering is pin sharp. I mean, pin sharp. It's properly connected to your inputs. And it's genuinely a pleasure to sit behind the wheel. It's not like other EVs where you're just kind of pootling along, taking in the countryside. You feel engaged. It feels like a real, you know, it feels sporty. It's not sporty, it shouldn't be, but it does give you that sense that you can fling it into a corner and it will follow you as you go. Honestly, EV manufacturers take note, because if I'm going to be making the change to electric anytime soon, it's going to be for something like this. Well, there you have it. What a year it has been for cars in 2023. We're heading towards an incredibly exciting electric future, but there is still something here for everybody, as I think we've just proven.
But the most important thing, obviously, is that I think I've had quite clearly the best day. I've driven three of the most exciting cars in the world: the McLaren Artura, the Porsche 911 GT3 RS, the BMW M3 Touring, and I've even had a little bit of luxury from the flying Spur.
I've driven another of the most exciting cars in the world with the MC20 Cielo. I've had the Ioniq 6, promising something truly special for our future. The hot hatch is still alive, thanks to the Type R. And I'm not sure I need to say anything else about the 911 Dakar. What a thing.
But we're both very pleased to say that those are Goodwood's Cars of the Year 2023. Thank you very much for watching.
Give each other a high five. Say that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Oh, do we get to go home now then?
No. Yeah.